Before we turn it over to Aaron, this is our first virtual only meeting. At the last board meeting, the board decided to try a different format that we will, once a quarter, we will have an only in-house meeting. And then the other two meetings in the quarter will be virtual. And the other decision that was made was that we will take the summer off. So our next meeting will be in September. And the current plan is for that one to be only in person. Most likely at the AgriLife building in Conroe, although that hasn't been firmed up yet. And we're thinking in terms of making that a potluck prior to the meeting. And we'll try to time it so that everybody can get home before it's dark. So look for some announcements on that to come. Gail could not be with us tonight. She's in Maryland with her mom, and she's connecting. She is moving her to a new living arrangement, and this is the first day, and she thought it best just to leave her evening open, depending on how that went. So she won't be with us tonight. So we may have an opportunity at the end of this meeting. The person that's going to provide that information hasn't signed in yet, but there has been an offer from a apiary owner to have beehive relocated to somebody's yard if you want those. So stay till the end of the meeting. There should be some information about that if the person signs in, which she indicated she would. If she doesn't, then you'll get an email on that. So with that out of the way, hold your questions or put your questions as they occur in the chat, and Aaron will field them at the end of the presentation. So our presenter tonight is Aaron Word. He is the spouse of a Pines and Prairies chapter member, Annie Word. And he has, I'll let him do most of the introduction. He has been, he said, interested in bees all his life, and he is a beekeeper here in, I think, Montgomery County. So with that, I will turn it over to Aaron Word.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I appreciate being able to be here with everybody to talk about this. I appreciate everyone taking time out of your day to come and listen to this too. I've like you said, I've been interested in bees for my whole life. It's really a joyful hobby, and being able to spread that love and share information, share some of the benefits of keeping bees is rewarding in of itself. So if I do a good job, maybe all of y'all will go out and get your own beehives, and if not, then at least hopefully you'll be able to share some more information and some good stuff about bees anyways. So currently I'm a volunteer beekeeper at the Mercer Botanical Gardens. I'm one of 3 current volunteers there. I'm still relatively new to beekeeping as a hobby. I've actually only had my hives for about 2 months or so, but still I've been through all the ropes of getting a hive going and that initial startup, and I feel like being able to talk through my experiences there will be very beneficial for people to hear. So I appreciate being here and letting me have this time. Let's see if I can get the presentation to move forward here. There we go. So yeah, a brief introduction about myself. So yeah, my name is Aaron Word. I've been a beekeeper officially for about 2 months now, though in reality, I decided I wanted to be a beekeeper about a year ago at this time, and spent a lot of time doing research, getting my hives and my equipment and getting everything ready for the bees to come in spring of this year. I actually have 2 hives in my backyard in Spring, Texas. One was a packaged box of bees that I bought online that shipped from Atlanta, Georgia. And the other one was actually a rescued swarm that we found at Mercer Botanic Garden. It was up in a tree, and we cut down the branch, saved the queen, saved the swarm, and it's now in a hive in my backyard as well. Both of the beehives that I have, I built myself. It's fun from that angle if you're any sort of a woodworking hobbyist or you know anybody who's a woodworking hobbyist. Being able to have that side of it as an enjoyment hobby as well is also largely enjoyable. And also, so my wife is a member of this group. She's a native plant enthusiast, and we have 2 daughters, Rose, who's 5, and Violet, who's 3. If you can't tell, there's a bit of a botanical theme in our family from those names. So they're listening now. I love you all so much. Um, so how did I get into beekeeping? Like I said, I've been interested in bees my whole life. I've always thought they are one of the most fascinating creatures on the planet. But there was always, something that came up that made me think it was an unattainable goal. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough land. I don't have enough knowledge. I don't want to get stung a lot. There was always something that came up that held me back from taking that leap. And eventually I started to learn more about the concept of backyard beekeeping. And I realized that a lot of those insecurities and things that I was worried about were not as big of deals as what I had initially thought. So I did some research on beehives. I actually, what really kicked off my whole endeavor, we were at a frozen yogurt shop of all places, and they had a diagram of a beehive on a wall, and I was like, that's more simplistic than what I thought it was. I bet I could build that. And it led me down this whole path to where now I am able to have two hives in my backyard. I took the plunge, and it's been very worth it so far. But why bees? So there's a ton of benefits to being a beekeeper. What mainly fascinated me and got me into it was the benefit it has to your local ecosystem. It improves pollination of your flowers in your gardens and any fruits and vegetable crops that you have. The whole nature of taking care of bees, to me, is a very relaxing and stress relieving and therapeutic hobby. I mentioned it earlier if anybody was listening in, but I liken it to sitting out by a campfire and having a flame flickering that you're just watching and transfixed by. I've many times set out with my bees and just watched them come in and out of the hive and do their flying dance and go off and come back with pollen packed into their little pouches. It's a very cathartic and therapeutic experience for me. Bees are fascinating creatures, and learning more about them and spreading that knowledge of bees is truly beneficial for everyone within our local ecosystems as well as the greater ecosystem of the country and the planet. I mentioned it's a fun woodworking project if you're into woodworking. And also the bee products are largely beneficial as well. Beeswax and rendering beeswax products are everywhere, from lip balms. I'll get a little bit more into it later, but soaps and lotions to many other things. And of course, honey is the one that most people think about. That last but not least, honey is delicious and magical, so can't forget about that. But I wanted to go into a little bit just about bees and the nature of bees first. I copied here 2 pictures of 2 of the more common types of beehives and what people may have actually seen and associated with beehives prior to this point. The top one is what they call a Langstroth hive. It's a stackable set of boxes which have frames that slide in and out. You commonly see these where the top is off and they'll pick up a rectangular frame that's covered in comb and bees on both sides. Those are nice because they're stackable. You can put boxes on, take boxes off as the hive needs to expand and grow, or if you're removing a honey section, those are usually on the top, you're able to do that without disturbing the queens and the brood that's on the lower sections. The other common type is a top bar hive, which is the lower picture. And that's a hive where the bees will build their comb. They'll grow the hive out in a more horizontal nature, as opposed to building it more vertically up and down. Both are relatively easy to maintain, work with in a backyard setting. It's really a personal preference thing. I actually have one of both myself. I'm trying to experiment and see which one of those is my personal preference. So um, give me a couple of years and I'll be back with my my report on that. Um, a bee colony that lives within the hive it's really similar to one large organism. Each bee has its job that it does to sustain the hive, keep the hive going and moving and thriving. I was going to go into just brief little summary of the different types of bees that you'll see in a hive, starting with the queen bee. You can see in this picture, I don't know if y'all can see my mouse with my shared screen, but the queen bee is the one with the longer abdomen, slightly different coloring. Um, you hear a lot about the queen bees. There's only one queen bee per hive. It's essentially the reproductive organ of the colony. It's the only bee that can lay fertilized eggs in the entire hive. So it's very important to keep that bee healthy and happy and laying. Otherwise, the longevity of the hive is going to be at risk. The lifespan of a queen bee is usually about 2 to 3 years. As a beekeeper, to keep the hive going, you can either wait for a new queen to be born in the hive and hope that it gets fertilized, or you can purchase a pre-fertilized queen, a pre-mated queen is what they call it, and introduce that into the hive. There's a strategy for requeening a hive that involves removing the previous queen and introducing a new queen that has a fresh batch of fertilized eggs within it. I kind of mentioned it there. About 7 days after birth, a queen bee will leave the hive. It'll fly out to mate. It'll mate with roughly 10 to 12 males if it's a good, successful trip. And then once it comes back, it will never leave the hive again. It remains in the hive for the rest of its life and lays the fertilized eggs in the comb that's built out by the worker bees. The worker bees themselves make up about 95% of all the bees in the hive. They are really the blood in the veins of the colony. Essentially every bee you've seen, unless you've been inside of a hive, probably every bee that you've seen has been a female worker bee. The female workers are the ones that are hatched from fertilized eggs. And yeah, it makes up about 95% of the bees in the hive. Depending on their age, they have different jobs that they progress through throughout their lifetime. After birth, their responsibilities include cleaning the hive, cleaning the cells, capping the brood. Eventually, they would evolve into taking care of the brood and the larva and tending to the queen, making sure that the queen is well maintained. And eventually, they'll move on to building out comb, handling food stores. And then the last job that they'll have throughout their life is to forage and look for outside resources to bring back to the hive. In the summertime, a worker bee's lifespan is really only about 30 to 40 days. Unfortunately, they work themselves hard, and that's why there are so many of them, is they continue to replenish their numbers. Let's see, what else was I going to say about the worker bees? In the wintertime, since there's less foraging to do, the lifespan does increase pretty drastically. But in the summertime is when you usually will see them out and about. So, and the third type is the drone bees. Those are the male bees, which are actually hatched from unfertilized eggs, which is kind of counterintuitive to most animals out there. But yeah, even unfertilized eggs are hatched into male bees, to drone bees. They're not very useful. To be blunt. Well, I mean, I guess they're useful for repopulating the species, but their only responsibility is to mate with queens. And more specifically, to only mate with queens from other hives. They're not going to mate with your queen for risk of inbreeding. So what they'll do is they'll typically fly up about 100 feet above the ground level, and they'll emit pheromones in a group. There'll usually be a group of a few dozen drone bees. And hopefully those pheromones will attract a queen. The queen will come and mate, and then there's nothing else for the drones to do. They'll go back to the hive and take up space, Again, the number of male drone bees in the hive will fluctuate depending on time of year. There's very, very few in the wintertime. In the summertime and springtime, there will be slightly more because that'll be the mating season for new queens, and that'll be the most successful time of year for a queen to be mated. So there'll be slightly more around that time period. But honestly, unless you've been in a hive, you've probably never seen a male bee. They are larger. Some people do mistake them for the queen, and there are distinct differences in the physiology, but you can understand why, because they're both significantly larger sizes. um, I wanted to just touch briefly on some facts about bees, but what I really wanted to talk about here is really the benefits of keeping bees and what I've learned and what I've experienced so far in in why I got into it. And again, the main reason was helping the ecosystem. Bees are pollinators. They fertilize plants by transferring pollen from one flower to another. Pollen is actually a food source for bees. So these forager bees will fly out, they'll collect pollen, go to different flowers, and just the nature of that cross-pollination will help fertilize plants so that they can grow strong and reproduce. And because of that pollination, it's estimated that as much as 30% of the world's food production is because of bees and the nature of bees. That's a huge amount of food that is created just by these lovable insects. And beyond that, it's also estimated that 90% of wild plants are pollinated by bees. Huge, huge impact on the ecosystem. And to put an economic number on that, I looked up this figure. Just in the U.S. alone, over $15 billion worth of crops are pollinated by bees every year, and that's just in the one country. So you can imagine on a global impact the vast impact that these guys will have, or these gals will have, I should say. And they truly do help your garden to thrive. They can make your flowers larger, more plentiful. They'll dramatically increase the yield of your fruit and vegetable plants too. I remember when I was a kid, my dad would grow watermelons and pumpkins in his garden in the backyard, and I remember him out there taking a flower and trying to rub it on another flower to pollinate the plants. And you think about the trouble that you would go through, and I don't know if he was ever very successful with what he was trying to do there anyways, but all of that is done naturally by bees if there are bees in your area. So within for one hive, they can actually travel out to 2 to 3 miles radius from the hive. So having a beehive in your backyard, it not only is good for your garden in your backyard, but for the whole neighborhood. It can really help your whole local ecosystem to thrive. There are a lot of therapeutic benefits to beekeeping. I mentioned it earlier, how I can just sit out there and watch them. Many beekeepers can attest it's a very meditative practice. Listening to the buzzing of the bees is very calming to some people. And it's also, I'm sure that a lot of people in this group can relate as well, being very involved in gardening and native plants. When you're gardening and when you're closely involved with nature and helping your environment to thrive, helping Mother Earth, it's a very rewarding feeling. And I find that a very beneficial aspect to beekeeping. Beyond that, there's also, I did some research on, there is what's called beehive air inhalation that some people swear by as an effective therapy for respiratory illnesses. I've never tried it myself, but I saw some pretty interesting pictures of essentially it looked like respirators connected via hose to a beehive. I've never tried it. I can't attest to it, but if people say that it's therapeutic, I'm not going to question it. I think that there's a large benefit throughout this process of being a beekeeper in learning about bees and spreading knowledge of bees, because I've already explained how bees are a vital part of our ecosystem. Yet year after year, we see declining in bee populations due to pesticides, diseases and pests. Climate change is a big one. Even this year, with all this rain and this late start to summer, it seems like there's been a very heavy impact on bees. A couple master beekeepers that I've talked to have lost 2 or 3 queens in a single hive just because of this climate and the impact of this rainy season to start the spring and summer. As well as habitat destruction. As more buildings, more houses go up, less and less natural habitats are existing for bees, and that's driving the populations down, which is very unfortunate. But it's why beekeepers and people who look to keep bees are doing a valuable service. The more that people know about bees and how to protect them is the more likely we can prevent this rapid decline in bee population. And if nothing else from today's presentation, I hope that people will learn a little bit more about bees to move forward and just educate about what they're like and how we can help them. I mentioned fun projects for woodworking hobbyists. This was right up my alley because I was looking for a good project, and this one really sucked me in. There are specs all over the place online for how to build a beehive. You can buy them if you want, or you can have fun, design one yourself, and go for it. I built my hives myself out of scrap wood that was sitting around my garage. I don't think I spent more than about $30 or $40 to build 2 complete beehives. Most of that was screws and bolts and stuff like that that I just didn't have laying around. And then the products that you get from the bees, that's another huge benefit. I mentioned the numerous uses of beeswax earlier. It's used in everything from candles to lip balms, to lotion bars, hair care products, waterproof matches and fire starters for the camping enthusiasts out there. Wood polish. I've made, just in my short time as a beekeeper, I've already made lip balms and candles and wood polish just out of recipes I found online, and they're wonderful and very cost effective. Very, very cost effective. If your feed source of wax is something that you just get from the beehive outside, yeah, it does not cost much to make some very, very pleasant lip balm and candles. And then again, not to bury the lead, honey. Gotta get my honey. Bees create honey. They can create, a single hive can create up to 100 pounds of honey each year, and that's with good hive management, adequate cool tools, good weather, stuff like that. But 100 pounds of honey, that's a lot of honey. Granted, most of the honey is needed for the hive. They're creating that for them. They're not necessarily creating it for us to eat, but I like to think that they don't mind us swiping a small smackerel of honey every now and again. Honey is a really fascinating food product. It unless there's like a lot of moisture in it, it typically will not spoil. The note I have here, archaeologists found 3,000-year-old honey in an Egyptian pyramid that was still edible. I don't know if I would have eaten it myself, but they said that it was still edible. So that's pretty fascinating that a food can last for that long without spoiling. And beyond being delicious, there are a lot of health benefits that are attributed to honey, especially local honey, including reduction in allergies, helping to build that allergy immunity, and also soothing sore throats if you've got a sore throat or any sort of respiratory thing. I can attest to allergies. I've had the worst seasonal allergies my whole life. Every time spring rolls around, I'm in bed, unable to do anything because allergies. And I've started eating local honey. And maybe it's a placebo effect, or maybe there is actually an aspect of getting that pollen to build immunity. But I have found there to be benefits from having local honey to help yourself get through those rough allergy seasons. Since this is a native group, I wanted to talk a little bit about the impact of native plants on bees. There is a lot of benefits to native plants for bees. There was actually a study done by UC Berkeley in 2013 that showed that both wild and managed bees prefer to forage on native plants over exotic plants. And the conclusion of the study was that an abundance of native plants can help to, quote unquote, enhance wild bee abundance and diversity and to maintain honeybee health, which is phenomenal. I mean, the work that's done by native plant gardeners helps the bees to thrive, which helps the greater ecosystem to thrive. There's a number of reasons for why native plants are good. Part of it is it's natural to the local growing climate, allows them to thrive in abundance. It's also, there's less pests, less mites that impact your native plants. And pests and mites can be devastating to beehives. Wax moths are devastating. Varroa mites are devastating. Hive beetles are another pest that commonly get in. If there are less need for those pests to be around, then there's less risk to the hive. And then they can also, they use less, they require less pesticides and less poisons to be sprayed. If you do it right, from what I hear, you don't have to have any pesticides for a native garden, which again, pesticides can be devastating to bee populations. So the less we can have of that in the ecosystem, the better. I wanted to talk a little bit about some common misconceptions about beekeeping, and especially backyard beekeeping. And one of the big questions that you hear and you hear worried about is, will the bees sting me? Again, I have kids. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. And should I be worried about my kids being around a beehive? And typically the answer is no. Bees do not want to sting you. A lot of people are fearful of bees. I had somebody tell me earlier, how can it be therapeutic to have bees? You have, thousands of creatures with stingers in your backyard. But in reality, bees do not want to sting you. They will only sting if there is a desperate need to protect their colony. They don't seek out and destroy. If you see them foraging on plants, there's no need to run away. Their job is not to attack you. Their job is to return to the hive with what they've foraged. It's natural to have a bit of a fear around bees because you don't want to be stung. But the exposure to bees and normalization of bees within the infrastructure of a backyard and a neighborhood, it can really help to reduce that fear, decrease that stigma that people feel around bees, which is hugely beneficial. You hear it asked, what about if the bees swarm? If they leave the hive in a cloud of bees, that's got to be dangerous, right? And again, no, the answer is not. When bees swarm, it can look frightening. Yeah, it's a cloud of bees. It looks very apocalyptic, for lack of a better term. But again, it's the purpose of that is for the hive to continue to live. They're looking for a new habitat so that they can continue to grow. So they're not interested in attacking people. That's just going to reduce the numbers that they have to build their new habitat. Bees, it truly is a system to build these colonies. They need every bee they can get to perform their job, and they don't want to waste bees on attacking people. So the more you can leave bees alone, better off it is, but they're not going to seek you out to do you harm. Some other misconceptions. Don't bees need to be in a rural setting? I don't live in the countryside. The bees won't thrive here. That's not really true either, because bees are very resourceful. They can find nectar and pollen in even the most urban of areas. There are rooftop beekeeping facilities in major cities, including Houston. I know of a person who works in downtown Houston, and their office building has beehives. So you wouldn't expect it to be all around like that, but they can thrive in basically any ecosystem. Granted, it's better if they have a lot of flowers and a lot of plants to forage from, but you'd be surprised with how resourceful they can be. And another big one that really held me back from backyard beekeeping for a long time is just the question of, will they bother my neighbors? I don't want to be a bad neighbor. I don't want bees to go off and sting my neighbors or to frighten my neighbors. But in reality, it's likely that your neighbors will never know that they're there. Bees, they've spread out to over a 2 to 3 mile radius. Will they land in your neighbor's yard sometimes? Yeah, of course, but not in the overflowing amount that a lot of people think. And again, as I just explained, if you can explain to your neighbors how harmless bees are, especially the foragers, that'll put a lot of their fears at ease. And there's a lot of times, if neighbors have fears or trepidation at first, you can explain that and ease their worries about that. And beyond that, there's strategies you can do to reduce the impact on the bees to your neighbors. You can put up walls to affect their flight paths, so they're not, so that they would have to fly upwards instead of directly over. You can make sure that they have ample water sources in your backyard, so they're not flying off to your neighbor's swimming pool to get water and stuff like that. So there's a lot of effective methods that you can look into to how to be a good neighbor and also keep your bees happy and healthy. And then the last slide here, I wanted to talk a little bit about, how do you get started in backyard beekeeping? There's me with my, I mean, heck, that picture was from about a month ago. So that was about just a single month's worth of growth, from nothing to about 6 bars of that level of comb build out just for one hive. So they work hard, they work fast. The best time to start a new hive is in springtime, early summer months. It's still possible to get a hive this year if somebody were to really rush out and get going. But just like with a garden, preparation is really key. You don't want to run into something without doing the work and making sure that you're prepared for the different hurdles that'll come your way. There's a ton of books and resources and magazines out there. There's beekeeping organizations that will, a lot of them have webinars that will go over a different topic every month. And those are all valuable resources online that'll help you build out your bee knowledge if you do want to have your own beehive eventually. And then work to get the equipment. You don't want to skimp on things if you can't help it. I wouldn't get the cheapest of suits and the cheapest of equipment, but there are a lot of resources out there for what you're looking for with a suit and equipment and your hives and so on and so forth. So I encourage everybody to go out and research. And if this is something that's piqued your interest before, I highly encourage this as a hobby. I have found it extremely rewarding, and I know that anybody who loves nature and loves bees and everything about the knowledge base and their impact on the ecosystem can get a lot of enjoyment out of this hobby. So that was the last of my slide. Here are some more pictures of the bees. This picture on the left, that was after about 3 to 4 days in my hive. They had built that first little piece of comb. As you can see kind of blurry in the background, that's my top bar hive. And then on the right, those are also some of my bees. That was actually a piece of comb that unfortunately fell off. I was trying to reattach it to the bar, but it was an amazing picture taken by my wife of the beautiful little bee poking its head in to forage some nectar out of there. So, I encourage questions, please. I don't know how we want to go through that, if there are any good questions out there, but I'm happy to take them.
Well, one question, you mentioned that there would be up to 100 pounds of honey per hive per year, but it sounded like that included the honey needed to sustain the hive. So how much could be harvested per hive?
It depends a lot on the hive and how populated the hive is. One of the things that's wonderful about the Langstroth hives, which I'll go back to, there it is. It's the boxed one, is that you're able to really separate out the larger brood cells from pure honey cells. With something like a top bar, you can't really control which ones have brood, which ones have honey as easily, but you're able to very clearly see the population of bees and just gauge how much honey needs to be left for the bees versus how much is in excess that you can take. It's easy to want to take more than you should because honey is amazing. But if you do, there are other ways you can help the bees to survive. They're not going to die if you give them ample one-to-one sugar and water mixtures and some pollen patties. They'll survive without all of the honey, but that can also get to be more of a drain on resources. And especially in the winter months, you want to get into your hive as little as possible, just because cold air can be detrimental to bees. So the winter months is really when they need to have those honey stores, because opening the hive to give them more pollen or more sugar water can really affect the well-being of the hive.
Another series of questions from Anne. She said, where in my garden is the optimal place for a hive? Sun, question mark, shade, question mark. Close to the plants, does it matter?
Well, so it doesn't have to be close to the plants. They'll do a good job of finding all of your local plants. It needs to be a sunny part of the day and shaded part of the day. You don't want it to be under the sun all day long, especially in Texas heat, because that can really take a drain on them. What you'll find with hives is that if it gets too hot within the hive, a lot of the worker bees will get towards the hive entrances and start fanning their wings. I just fanned my wings as a way to cool down the interior of the hive. So if it's going to be particularly hot in the summer, you don't want it to be sunny on the hives all the time, because your bees are going to spend all of their time and resources just keeping the hive clean as cooled, as opposed to going out and foraging like you would want them to do to build up food stores. If you're in a colder
Can I
climate,
add
though,
to that?
yes, of
I've
course.
been a beekeeper for about 15 years,
Awesome.
and we mentor new beekeepers. So a couple of things in trying to figure out where to put your hive. It's really good to put it facing south or southwest, because our winter weather comes from the north and the east. I also like to find places that have a windbreak behind it, either bushes or trees that protect it in the winter. And here, if you have like oak trees, they shed their leaves in the winter so the bees get more sun, so that is, warming to them. And in the summer, like now, they're in the shade more. People believe that having more sun deters the small hive beetles. So where you place it, a lot has to do with, are you on a lot in the woodlands? We've had beekeepers there, which gives you less options than if you have acreage. But you look for windbreaks, and you will look to face them away from the prevailing winter winds. Also, here in Montgomery County, if you want to get interested in bees, Montgomery County beekeepers meet once a month. We have a mentor-mentee program. There's a less formal group over in the Magnolia area called the Magnolia Swarm. Huntsville now has a fairly active bee club. So if you want to, get involved, we always recommend, if you're thinking about it this time of year, join a club, study, read, be careful what you see on YouTube. Some is good, some is not, and plan on ordering bees in the fall. You have to have patience to be a beekeeper, and this is a good time to start it.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. That was excellent.
And in the chat, Jay Gowan has suggested a book by Frank Mortimer, so you might check your chat for his recommendation for a good book. I'm looking for other questions. I don't see any. And I don't also see the person who was made the offer, who is a apiary owner in Montgomery, who said that she had hives that she would be willing to locate to people's yard. And I was going to have her explain that. She said she'd be here tonight. Apparently something came up. So if that offer is still good, I will have her renew it, and Gail will send it out. Gail has the only one with access to the complete list of emails, so she can send that out to those to our Pines and Prairies membership. So other questions, can you mow easily around the beehives?
Can I speak to that? No, you cannot. Bees hate gasoline. They hate motors. They hate noise and vibration. We have an electric weed eater that my husband goes around the beehives with, that the bees don't seem to mind that. Otherwise, we have a bit of acreage, so he has a big riding mower. He will make a swipe through the beehive, keep on going through the bee yard, keep on going, wait a couple of minutes and make another round through. And that's the way you want to to mow around your bees, because they hate gasoline mowers. If you have an electric mower, give it a go.
Yeah, so I have not personally been stung while mowing, but it's mostly because I don't mow my backyard. I pay somebody.
So another question, this is from Ann. When I'm not gardening, I'm traveling. How long can a hive go without maintenance?
It also depends. A lot of beekeepers want to get into their hive as little as possible, maybe once a week or even less. You don't want to get into it too much. I was actually reading an article about a prison that had beehives as like an activity for inmates to do and to learn about. And it was popular, and they were getting into the hives way too often. They were getting in every day, and it actually had very detrimental effects on the hive. Hive ended up not surviving because of it. Bees, operate in dark, so if you continue to open it up, that can be detrimental. You want to be able to get in enough to give a quick health inspection, look for pests, look for how much the health of the queen. You want to look to see if it's laying eggs, if there's eggs in each cell and larvae in each cell, a good amount of capped brood, just to make sure that there's no issues with the queen. But a lot of the times when I go into the hive, I don't even really care if I see the queen as much as I see that there's signs that the queen is performing well. And then I'd like to close up and get out of there as quick as possible so as not to disturb them. So how long can it go without maintenance? It depends. It depends on the time of year, how much resources they have built up. But getting in there sparingly is not a bad thing necessarily.
I go into my hives maybe 3 times a year. And I've seen hives that had been abandoned for a couple of years out in a field that were doing just fine.
Right.
So I'm of the opinion that going in too often is more detrimental than benign neglect, if you will.
Okay, I think that's all the questions I can see. Aaron, you might check your chat to see if you got ones that were directed only to you. I think there was another message but it was about maintenance. There's another question, what are the best locations for hives? I thought that would have been addressed previously.
Yeah, I think we touched on that one decent.
Yeah.
That's all I've got.
All right. Well, Aaron, on behalf of everybody here, very interesting. It does have me enthused about this. So really nice presentation and another way to really engage with nature and be fascinated by just how wonderfully complex it is. So and you get honey. So I see people that are now congratulating on your presentation, and likewise are expressing interest in it. So you've satisfied your mission, and really appreciate you taking the time to put this together for us. It was a great presentation, very interesting.
Thank you so much for having me. Any questions you can think of, feel free to reach out. LinkedIn is a good way to reach me, if nothing else. I don't know if you want me to email this presentation out. I can send it, and if you want to distribute it or anything like that. But just let me know.
We will post it on our YouTube channel tomorrow, so it will be available for people that to review in that way. So I think unless somebody requested a PDF copy of it, we'll rely on that, and if they do, we'll be in touch with you for a PDF copy.
All right.
Thank you so
very
much. All right, everyone. So we will convene again after the summer in September. It'll be totally in person, and wait for the details to come out. So I hope everybody has a great summer. And if we don't see you out volunteering, we'll see you then. So good night, everyone.